Hello, this is Dr. Nadia Fouladian, and this is the second video of the first part of the digestive system. So far, we talked about the general parts of the digestive system. Now we are going to go talk about each specific part separately. So first we start with the digestive tract, and then after that, when we finish, we go to the accessory organs of the digestive system. Regarding the digestive tract, we are not covering oral cavity here. You can go over the book and go over the different parts of that. We start with the pharynx and then we talk about the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. So regarding the pharynx, as we discussed some parts of the pharynx, when we talked about the respiratory system, we said that pharynxes include nasopharynx, that is behind the nasal cavity, oropharynx, that behind the oral cavity, and laryngopharynx, that behind the larynx, right? So pharynx in general serves as a common passageway for food, liquid, and air altogether. And we have pharyngeal muscles that involved in the swallowing. We have four groups of the muscles. We have pharyngeal constrictors, palatopharyngeus, stylopharyngeus, and palatal muscles. So among these, we just emphasize on one group here regarding the digestive system, that these are pharyngeal constrictors, that they are pushing the bolus toward the esophagus, right? We won't be asked about the other ones. Here you see that these are all the muscles around the pharynx, and they are helping in the swallowing process. And these are all the muscles that we have, like for example here you see the pharyngeal constrictors that we have all over. All these muscles they are under control of the nervous system, so that they can adjust their movements so that the swallowing of the food and liquid into the esophagus can be adjusted with the passage of the air into the larynx. And that is the one that if it just go a little bit up and down, that the food or liquid may go into the wrong way, get into the trachea, right? So the swallowing process is called deglutition. So deglutition is the other name for the swallowing. And the swallowing process has three phases. The first one is buccal phase. That's the phase that the food is inside of the mouth. The tongue pushes the food to the oropharynx area, and this phase is voluntary. As long as the food is in the mouth, we can just take it out. We can decide when we want to swallow and all those ones, right? Then after that, it gets to the pharyngeal phase. Then in this phase, the epiglottis closes over the glottis and swallowing begins, right? So that we make sure that when we swallow after that, it doesn't go to the larynx and trachea. Then when it passes through the laryngopharynx, it gets to the esophagus, and this is the esophageal phase of the swallowing, that the upper esophageal sphincter, the sphincter that we have in the upper part of the esophagus, that opens and the bolus begins moving down the esophagus toward the weak sphincter that we have in the lower part, that we call it lower esophageal sphincter, and that passes toward the stomach. Here you are looking at the three phases of the swallowing. That's the buccal phase, that the food is still in the mouth. We are moving the food around by the help of the tongue and the chewing by the teeth and all those things. Then start going down. Then in the pharyngeal phase, the epiglottis gets closed here and closes the passage to the larynx here, so that the food passes toward the posterior, that is the esophagus. Then in the esophageal phase, this bolus has passed from the upper esophageal sphincter here, and then it starts going down here, continue its way down until it passes through the lower esophageal sphincter and gets into the stomach. So that was regarding the pharynx and its role in the swallowing. The other information regarding the pharynx we had discussed before in the respiratory system, and you can refer to that one to know more about the pharynx. But this was the part that was related to the swallowing, related to digestive system. Then after pharynx we have esophagus. Now the food have got into the esophagus. Esophagus is a hollow muscular tube that extends from the pharynx that goes all the way toward the stomach. It's about 25 centimeters long and about 2 centimeters diameter. It's located posterior to the trachea. Always remember this one. Trachea is anterior, esophagus is posterior. And it enters the peritoneal cavity when it passes through the hole through the diaphragm that we call it esophageal hiatus, right? The innervation of the esophagus is the vagus nerve, that is the cranial nerve 10, from the esophageal plexus. And esophagus contains one upper and one lower esophageal sphincter at the two ends of them. And here you see the esophagus here. After the pharynx that you have here, esophagus starts here and goes all the way down, passes through the diaphragm and gets into the stomach here. Now, regarding the histology of the esophagus and esophageal wall is made of 4 layers again, right? Mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and doesn't have serosa, it has adventitia. Now let's go talk about them one by one. Mucosa that we have for the esophageal wall contains the stratified non-keratinized squamous epithelium still, like the mouth and the pharynx. And muscularis mucosa here is very thin or even absent. In submucosa, both mucosa and submucosa have large folds and they contain submucosal glands that produce mucus. We need lots of mucus so that it lubricates the lumen of the esophagus so that the food that is coming can move downward more easily. Then we have muscularis externa, that is a mix of a skeletal and a smooth muscle. So pay attention that in the pharynx we have mostly skeletal muscles. In the esophagus, we can divide that to 3 thirds. The first upper third, middle third, and lower third, right? The upper part is mostly skeletal muscles. The middle part is the combination of the skeletal and smooth muscle, and the lower third is mostly a smooth muscle. But pay attention that both of these skeletal and smooth muscles are under involuntary control. We do not have to decide when the skeletal muscles that we have in the pharynx and the esophagus have to contract and do their action. They are under involuntary control. Then finally, the esophagus does not have the serous layer. Instead, it has the adventitia. As we said, the parts of the digestive system that they are attached to the posterior wall, they are not completely inside of the cavity. They have adventitia in their outer layer. Here you see this histology here. You have the mucosa here. Then under that you have submucosa, and then you have muscularis, and finally you have adventitia. So that was regarding the esophagus after the pharynx. Now the food is passing through the esophagus and get to the stomach. Just getting back here and grab your attention that the last part of the esophagus, after passing through the diaphragm, it has a small portion inside of the abdominal cavity. That small portion of the esophagus inside of the abdominal cavity is covered with the serosa, but all the other ones that are above the diaphragm and inside of the thoracic cavity, they are all covered by they have adventitia in the last layer of them. Just want to grab your attention. Excuse me. Sorry about the interruption. So that was regarding the esophagus, and now let's go to the stomach and talk about the stomach. Stomach performs three major functions. First, it temporary storages the ingested food that has come from the esophagus. As when the food gets into the stomach, it doesn't just pass right away. It stays there for a while, like about half an hour. Then stomach makes the mechanical digestion of the ingested food. As the food that we have over there, we have some movements of the stomach back and forth that it makes the food to just mix with each other and breaks down to the smaller pieces mechanically. Also, we have some chemical digestion of the ingested food that starts in the stomach. The end result of the bolus that was entered into the stomach is the production of the chyme. So all the material that they mix, break down and everything, when they get out of the stomach, we call them chyme. So regarding the anatomy of the stomach is intraperitoneal, as we discussed before, and is located in these areas of the abdominal pelvic cavity. Remember, we have 9 areas for the abdominal pelvic cavity, 9 regions, and the stomach is located in the gastric, left hypochondriac, epigastric, by gastric I meant epigastric, right? Hypochondrial, epigastric, and a portion of umbilical and left lumbar region. It takes a portion of any of these ones. So this is important because we don't need to memorize this one. We won't be asked about this one. But just know that when we have any problem with the stomach, the pain or the kind of abnormality can be shown in any of these 4 areas, but mostly in the epigastric. So regarding the anatomy, first regarding the gross anatomy of the stomach, when you look at the stomach, you can see 4 areas. First is cardia. Cardia is the first part after the esophagus is connected to the stomach. We call that connection as the esophageal gastric junction, right? The connection between the esophagus and the stomach. So the first part of the stomach after that is called cardia. So that's the closest part to the heart. Then we have the fundus. Fundus is the top part that goes after that junction between the esophagus and the stomach. If you put a horizontal line, the part of the stomach that is located above that is called fundus. Then after that we have the main part of the stomach that we call it body, and finally the last part is called pyloric part. The pyloric part by itself is divided into the pyloric antrum. It's like a triangular space that I will show you. Then after that we have pyloric canal, and finally we have pylorus and pyloric orifice. Around that we have pyloric sphincter. Now stomach has 2 curves. One a small curve on the upper part, we call it lesser curvature. One larger curve on the lower part, as we call it greater curvature. And we have omentum, one lesser omentum and one greater omentum, that they are attaching to these 2 curves. With the lesser curvature of the stomach, we have lesser omentum that is attaching between the lesser curvature of the stomach and the liver. And to the greater curvature of the stomach, we have greater omentum that is attaching between the attaching to the greater curvature, and as we discussed before, it goes down and loops back behind itself, and on the back attaches to the lower part of the transverse column, right? So these two omentum together we called omenta as the plural form. So here you're looking at the gross anatomy of the stomach here. Here you see the part, the intraperitoneal part of the esophagus here. Then you have here the gastroesophageal junction here. That is the connection between the stomach and esophagus. Now the first part after that here is called cardia, right? Then if you put a horizontal line here, any part that is above that from the stomach is called fundus. Then after this line upward and downward, this is called the body as the main part of the stomach. Then from here is called the pyloric part. Pyloric part, the first part is this triangle that we call it antrum. And that is significant because we have specific cells here that we call them G cells. They're mostly found in this area in the antrum, and they are producing a hormone, we call it gastrin. Because of that, they're called the G cell, that we're going to talk about them and their function. Then after that, you have pyloric canal, and finally you have pyloric sphincter with this pyloric orifice here in the middle. So this was regarding the gross anatomy of the stomach. Now let's go and talk about what we have histologically in the wall of the stomach. So before that one, let's see this lesser omentum. As you see here, this is lesser curvature of the stomach, and this is the greater curvature of the stomach here. You see you have a double layer of the peritoneum and mesentery between lesser curvature and the liver. Here we call it lesser omentum. And here we have greater omentum connected here. Now regarding the lesser omentum that we have it here, we can divide it to two parts. So as you see, the parts that are involved, one part is with the stomach, between liver and the stomach. One part is between the liver and the beginning of the duodenum. So this omentum is called as this part, the first part between the liver, that we call it hepato or hepatic. Anything that is related to the liver is called hepato or hepatic. And the other end is the stomach, is called hepatogastric ligament, this first part, right? The second part is called hepatoduodenal ligament. And this second part is significant because there are three structures that are passing between this double layer of the peritoneum here and get into the liver, or coming from the liver and then pass through here, goes behind the stomach, and then finally get into the duodenum. Duodenum is this C part, that is the first part of the small intestine and is right after the pyloric sphincter of the stomach here. Those three structures are important. It includes one artery, one vein, and one lymphatic duct. When we're going to talk about the liver, we will see the significance of these three because they have some branches inside of the liver at the microscopic level, right? But right here, let's learn that which artery, vein, and biliary. Sorry, if I said lymphatic, that's wrong. That's a biliary duct here that we have. So we have the hepatic artery, a branch of the common hepatic artery is passing here. We have hepatic portal vein that is passing here. You remember that hepatic portal vein comes from the digestive system. It comes from the inferior mesenteric vein, superior mesenteric vein, and splenic vein. If you remember those ones from the blood vessels that we discussed before. So all these three connect to each other finally and make the hepatic portal vein. And hepatic portal vein brings all the absorptions that is done inside of the digestive system, bring it all toward the liver, and then later from the liver another vein getting out as hepatic vein, and that one gets into the inferior vena cava. So liver is in the middle of the way of this venous blood to get into the inferior vena cava, to get into the heart, and then in the next contraction of the heart spread to all around the body here, right? When we get to the liver, we will talk about the liver and its function and what it's doing with all the nutrition and the material that is coming from the digestive system to the liver, right? And so that was regarding the vein, and the biliary duct that is come here is called the common bile duct that pass through here and go, as we said, pass behind the stomach and enters into the second part of the duodenum and pours its secretion toward the food after has come out of the pyloric sphincter and get into the duodenum. When the food gets into the stomach, it remains there. As we said, it has some movement that makes the pieces of the food smaller, and it has some enzymes over there. They are acting. We're going to talk about all of them shortly. But then, little by little, these pyloric sphincter get released. Some of that, the end part of that bolus that now is called chyme, gets out and gets into the duodenum. Then after a while, another part, after a while, another part, and releases the chyme little by little toward the duodenum. Now, this is regarding the omenta that we just taught. The mesenteries associated with the stomach are called the greater and lesser omentum. Greater omentum, as we discussed, extends from the greater curvature of the stomach and drapes like a curtain across the surface of the small intestine. So when we open the cadaver, the first thing that we see inside of the abdomen, that's a great omentum that, like a curtain, it just covers all the other organs that we have under that, right? Then we have lesser omentum. Lesser omentum extends from the lesser curvature of the stomach to the liver. The part that is from stomach to the liver is called hepatogastric ligament, and the part that extends from the pylorus and duodenum region to the liver is the hepatoduodenal ligament. That we talk about the tree structure that is passing through the hepatoduodenal ligament. Now, blood supply of the stomach. There are three branches from the celiac trunk that go and supply the stomach. You remember, celiac trunk is the first branch of the aorta inside of the abdomen, that one of the three branches that we have individually that gets separate from the anterior side. That celiac trunk is supplied all the structures that come from the first part of the digestive tract inside of the abdomen. That first part of digestive tract in the abdomen, that's the one that makes the pancreas, duodenum, and the stomach and spleen, right? So all these structures comes from that first part of the tube, and their blood supply also is come from the celiac trunk. So the three branches that supply in the stomach, they include left gastric artery, splenic artery, and common hepatic artery. All three of these come from the celiac trunk, and all three are supplying the stomach. You don't need to know these gray areas that they're specifically going to supply which specific part of the stomach. Just know the name of these three and that these are supplying all different parts of the stomach. And here you see the celiac trunk here, that after diaphragm is separating right here, right below the diaphragm, and makes these three branches that you see, that left gastric here, common hepatic, and the splenic. Now that was regarding the gross anatomy of the stomach. Let's go over the histology of the stomach. We said that in general we had these four layers in the wall of the digestive system: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. Now let's see what we have here in the stomach specifically. Regarding the inside of the cavity of the stomach, we have some fold that we call them gastric fold, and other name for that is gastric ruga. When we talk about one fold, and rugi, that's the all of them together, like Olga, also. We have ruga, rugi, right? These are that when we have relaxed stomach, mucosa makes some folds, forms numerous muscular ridge that we call it ruga, each one. And these folds permit expansion of the stomach whenever we need it. Whenever more food is coming to the stomach, it has more space to accommodate more food. And a stretched stomach exhibit less prominent folds. When it expands, obviously those folds goes down. When it is relaxed, you see those folds more. Now, in the smooth muscle layer, we have in the muscularis externa of the stomach, that is the part that is different than the other parts, we have oblique muscle, circular muscle, and longitudinal muscle. You remember that we said that in general, in the wall of the digestive tract, we have inner circular and outer longitudinal. So if we go from the outside, again here we have the same. The outermost layer is longitudinal, so again we can say outer longitudinal and inner circular, and the oblique layer is the innermost here. So to keep those two, circular and longitudinal, in the way that you learned before, we can say innermost oblique muscle, inner circular, and outer longitudinal. In any way that you memorize that, just know that the innermost layer is oblique, the outermost layer is longitudinal, and in the middle you have circular. Here, when you look at the layers of the stomach from the inside, you see inside you have some gastric fold, that each one is called ruga, altogether rugi. Then you have so that was the mucosa. Then you have submucosal layer. Then you have muscularis externa, that they are three layer. Oblique is the innermost one. Then you have circular in the middle, and you have longitudinal in the outer one here. And then out of all these ones, you have serosa. As you remember, stomach is intraperitoneal, therefore is covered with the visceral peritoneum all outside. Now, when you look at the mucous membrane, from the upward of that, you see such a view here, that you see that this is like a volcanic options that you have it coming up. It has some ridges goes up, and it has some parts that goes down, like a hole that goes over there down inside. So these are the parts that we call gastric pits. Those holes are called gastric pits, and these are the ones that are making the gastric glands over there. Now let's go over more details regarding the, sorry about the sound. Let's go over more details about the histology of the stomach, and we start with the mucosa. That, as we said before, small intestine, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine, they are lined with the epithelium that we have over there, that's simple columnar epithelium. So stomach is covered, the mucosa, the epithelium of the mucosa is simple columnar epithelium. The structures within the lining of the stomach that we have several types of the cell. The first one that we have on the surface of the mucosa is called mucous surface cells, that they are producing mucus, right? Their function is to produce lots of mucus to protect the surface of the mucous membrane from the acid of the stomach, because you will see that inside of the stomach we have a huge amount of the acid that is related to its function. So these mucus that is produced by these mucous surfaces are protecting the surface layer of the mucosa. Then we have gastric pits that as I showed you, that led to the gastric glands, and I will show you the more detailed picture regarding those ones. Gastric pits and glands contain the several cells, gastric secretory cells, that those include mucous neck cell, parietal cell, chip cells, and some cells we call them enteroendocrine cells. So again, what does entero means? Enteric means related to the digestive system. And what does endocrine means? Endocrine cells are the cells that they are producing one type of the hormone that they get into the blood and they go and affect in the target organ. So these endocrine cells that are specifically related to the digestive system we call enteroendocrine cells. Now let's go talk about these ones that we have in the mucosa. So in this section that you see here, you have all four layers. From the outside you have serosa. We have the three layers of the smooth muscle that you have here, the outer longitudinal, inner circular, and innermost oblique layer. Then you have submucosa that, like any other parts of the digestive tract, it has lots of blood vessels inside of them and all the other things that we discussed. And now we have the mucosa. Now let's talk about the mucosa and the parts that we have inside. First, we have the epithelium, that they are simple columnar here. And then under that we have lamina propria, and you see that we have the capillary, blood vessels capillary here, and later you see that we have the smallest branch of the lymphatic system that we call them lacteal. And also we have one layer of the smooth muscle that we call it muscularis mucosa. Now let's go and see these mucosa of the stomach in more detail and the types of the cell that we have here in these sections here and in the real histology that we have. So you see that the first part that comes following the whole is called gastric pit. So this first part is the gastric pit, that following to that you have the gastric gland, that all the secretory cells of the stomach are located here, therefore we call it gastric gland. The cells that we have here, first on the surface of the mucosa we have mucous surface cell on this area. Then in the neck area we have mucous neck cells. Both of these are producing lots of mucus to protect the tissue of the stomach itself from the lots of acid that we have inside of the stomach. Then it continues with some other cells that we have, like here we have the parietal cells. We're going to talk about them. We have the chip cells here, more deep here. As you see, parietal cells are located more toward the lumen here, and they are in lighter color. And we have the chip cells that they are darker color, and they are more toward the deeper parts of the mucosa of the stomach. And also we have some cells that we call them G cells. Those are part of the enteroendocrine cells. We have some enteroendocrine cells inside of the stomach. One of them are G cells that are producing gastrin. Now let's go and talk about them one by one. I'm just showing you here that the things that we discussed before, that in the lamina propria you may have some smooth muscle. You see an example of those ones. These are not in layers like the muscularis mucosa, but they are scattered here. Some muscles are scattered inside of the lamina propria. So, to reviewing those ones, we have gastric pills and gastric glands continuously replace lost stomach cells, and they produce gastric juice that includes all the secretions of the gastric gland. We call them gastric juice, right? So we have mucous surface cell that facing the lumen produce copious amount of the mucus to protect the lining of the stomach from the autodigestion by the acid of the stomach. We have mucous neck cell that located in the neck of the gastric pit and produce mucus to lubricate the food entering the stomach. And we have parietal cells. Now the parietal cells are secreting two material, intrinsic factor and hydrochloric acid. The intrinsic factor are facilitating the absorptions of vitamin B12 from the small intestine into the bloodstream. Vitamin B12 is a vitamin that is essential and important for the erythropoiesis. You remember, erythropoiesis is production of the red blood cells, right? We need vitamin B12, but vitamin B12 cannot work by itself in alone, so that can get absorbed. For vitamin B12 to get absorbed into the blood and get into the system, we need the intrinsic factor. So here you see that the intrinsic factor is produced from the parietal cells of the stomach. Then it goes down all the way and acts in the ileum. That's the third part of the small intestine, and over there helps the vitamin B12 to get absorbed through the small intestine into the bloodstream. And by that one, when vitamin B12 get absorbed, can go to the related area and help in the synthesis of the synthesis of the erythrocyte, right? So if we do not have intrinsic factor, what will happen? Vitamin B12 cannot get absorbed into the blood, and we will have low level of the vitamin B12. Therefore, the erythropoiesis production of the red blood cells goes down. Therefore, we may have one type of the anemia that comes from the deficiency of the vitamin B12. Although the level of the vitamin B12 might be normal by itself inside of the digestive system, but this cannot be absorbed just because of lack of the intrinsic factor. So it might be one cause of having low level of the vitamin B12 in the blood. So that was one thing that is produced, intrinsic factor that is produced by the parietal cell. The other thing that is produced by the parietal cell is the acid, hydrochloric acid. So this is the one that causes the acidity of the stomach, and its function is essential because it kills the microorganism. Most of the microorganism, when we eat something that always may have a few bacteria or microbe or germs on that, when they get into the stomach, they almost be killed. But if the microorganism is resistant to the hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid cannot kill them, those are among the resistant bacteria that may have serious effect over the body, because they have passed from the first line of the defense of the body, that is the acid of the stomach. The other functions of the hydrochloric acid is that denatures protein, like the many other substances that they are denatured by the acid, right? So it makes that the proteins start getting separate and activates the pepsinogen. So this is a function that is important because pepsinogen is a precursor that is not active. This is in inactive form, and that one is also produced by the stomach. In the next slide you will see that where does produce, but it needs the hydrochloric acid to be converted to the active form of itself, that is called pepsin. So these are the two factors that are produced by the parietal cells and their function. Now let's go about the chief cells. That is another cell that we have in the stomach. Chief cells is secreting pepsinogen. That pepsinogen that we said is secreted by chief cells. Then it converts to the pepsin through the action of the hydrochloric acid. So we need that acid. One function of the acid is converting pepsinogen to the pepsin, and then pepsin digests the proteins. So, so you see the function of the acid over the pepsinogen that converts that to the pepsin, and pepsin is needed for digestions of the protein. So as you see, digestions of the protein starts in the stomach. In newborns, chief cells also secreting the renin and gastric lipase, and these two are helping digestion of the milk, that is the main food that newborn are using. So that was regarding the chief cells, and the last types of the cell that we have in the stomach, they are enteroendocrine cells. Those are the cells of the stomach that produce hormone, as we discussed, and one of them is G cells that produce the hormone gastrin. Because of the gastrin, we call them G cells. And gastrin is a hormone that stimulates the parietal cell and chief cell both to release their product. Now, regarding the regulation of the gastric activity. Gastric motility means movement inside of the stomach and the production of the stomach acid and enzymes. So in general, all the gastric secretions are controlled by the nervous system and by hormones. The nervous system has the effect that has over the movement and over the secretion is that the vagus nerves, that is part of the parasympathetic innervation, is triggered by the sight and thought of the food. So the vagus nerves start activity just by the part that come from the seeing and thought or even smell and all those ones. Then we have the celiac plexus that it brings the sympathetic innervation to the stomach. And the other regulations is when the food enters the stomach and they cause the stretch of the wall of the stomach. Stretching causes the G cells to release gastrin. And as we said, gastrin is controlling the parietal cell and chief cells and cause them to release their own products. So we have the acid from the parietal cells, an intrinsic factor, and we have the pepsinogen from the chief cells, and those pepsinogen under the influence of the hydrochloric acid convert to pepsin and start the digestions of the proteins. Now the food, when it passes from the stomach and enters the small intestine, then we do not need, when most of the food has passed here and get into the small intestine, then it causes the same way, it may cause the stretch of the wall of the duodenum. And that one, it causes the release of the two other hormones that they are secreting, and cholecystokinin. These two inhibiting the gastrin release from the stomach. And also they are stimulating pancreatic and liver secretions toward the duodenum, right? It is as if that you are working in one room and you were some activity you will need in that room. Now you are leaving that area, you're not working that anymore, you do not need those things. You go to another room, so you're trying to suppress that activity inside of that room. You do not waste all the resources that you have in the first room, right? So the same way here, when there is no more food in the stomach, we do not need more gastrin anymore. Inhibit those ones. And also now you are in the small intestine, you need some enzymes, pancreatic enzymes, liver secretion, like bile that comes from the liver. All those ones get to the small intestine, and those are coming from the secretin and cholecystokinin.